Good evening, everyone. Buenas noches a todos. La librería independiente Books and Books y Miami Book Fair unen fuerzas para presentar esta noche virtual con Paola Ramos, discutiendo su nuevo libro Latinx, en busca de las voces que redefinen la identidad latina, publicado por Vintage en español. El libro se acaba de publicar ayer y también está disponible en inglés con el título Finding Latinx, In Search of the Voices Redefining Latino Identity. Espero que lo compren en uno de los dos idiomas. En esta inspiradora crónica de viaje de costa a costa, la periodista y activista Paola Ramos emprende la búsqueda de los individuos y comunidades que dan vida a un nuevo movimiento que está definiendo el término controversial Latinx. Paola Ramos es la presentadora y corresponsal para Vice y Vice News y contribuyente para Telemundo News y MSNBC. Paola fue directora adjunto de medios hispánicos para la campaña presidencial de Hillary Clinton en el 2016, así como funcionaria política en la Casa Blanca durante la presidencia de Barack Obama. ¿Cómo añoramos esos tiempos? Recibió su maestría en política pública del Harvard Kennedy School y su licenciatura de Barnard College, Columbia University. Vive en Brooklyn. Para moderar la conversación esta noche tenemos de invitado especial a Jorge Ramos. Jorge Ramos es periodista y columnista sindicado, aclamado por la revista Time como uno de los 25 hispanos más influyentes en los Estados Unidos. Ramos es el conductor del noticiero de Univision desde 1986, donde también es responsable del programa dominical Al Punto, donde analiza los temas clave de la semana y realiza entrevistas de actualidad. Ha ganado 8 premios Emmy por su trabajo como periodista. Recuerden que durante esta transmisión, la audiencia puede hacer preguntas oprimiendo el Ask a Question button en la pantalla. Tendremos tiempo de contestar algunas preguntas de la audiencia después de la conversación y lo haremos en español y en inglés. Latinx se puede comprar en Books and Books en el link de abajo de la pantalla. Cada libro que usted compre beneficiará a Books and Books durante estos tiempos difíciles y se lo agradecemos. Y ahora, sin más demora, quiero traer a nuestros invitados a la pantalla.
Hola.
Hola.
Hey, Pops.
Hola, Paola. ¿Cómo estás?
Muy bien. You made it.
Yo sé. Vengo del noticiero ahorita y venía volando porque no podía fallar, pero soy un poquito como tú, que me toca hacer de todo y queremos hacerlo todo, ¿no? Queremos hacerlo todo, ¿no? So, es la primera vez que te entrevisto, creo, ¿verdad?
I'm kind of nervous.
¿De verdad?
Sí.
Why don't you tell everyone that when I was driving here, she calls me and then she says, so what are we going to be talking about? No,
you said that. You said, what do you want to talk about? Where do we start?
And we were thinking, of course, we're going to be talking, let me just start with, this is the book that we're talking about. And of course, we're going to be talking about the book, and at some point, we're going to switch from English to Spanish, and in my case, with Spanglish. But what we were thinking is that I think people are expecting something more personal, Paula, ¿no crees?
I think so.
No? Because I don't think you want to do, and I don't think I want to do just like a normal interview, and what do you think, and what do you write the book, and that's it, no? So
no, I agree.
So why don't we start with how proud I am that you wrote this. I'm so proud of you, Paola. De verdad.
No, I mean it's hard to follow my mom's steps and your steps, and so a lot of what I wrote has been inspired by both of you. Now, and a lot of from what I grew up with and how I've seen you both use your words, and so a lot of that book is that.
Bueno, yo creo que cuando te vemos haciendo esto, uno se da cuenta de que algo habremos hecho bien, pero acabas de usar una frase muy bonita, how we use the words. You come from a family where everybody writes. El abuelo, Montaner escribe, mamá escribe,
Sí.
yo escribo. And how, when did you find out for the first time that you could write? That, and not only, and there was also a problem. People have to know that you spent most of your young years in Spain. So obviously you felt more comfortable in Spanish than in English, and then something happened. When was that?
So I think since I was a kid, I always liked to write. O sea, siempre me gustó escribir. I remember living in Madrid, and when you were in Miami, and we would write each other faxes, no? So I feel
Faxes,
like a lot
imagínate.
of ¿te acuerdas? Sí. So a lot of my childhood was, I remember perfectly, being younger and watching mom write her articles at night, watching you write your articles in the morning, you and I communicating constantly, and obviously watching my grandfather. And so I grew up around that. I think, and then also naturally, I didn't even know this, no, but my favorite classes were the ones in which I could write. There was a hard part when I moved from Spain to Miami, because my English was, you remember, I could barely get into schools in Miami. My English wasn't that good at that point.
How old were you? Were you 12, 13?
When I moved to Miami, I was 16. No, tenía 16 años cuando me mudé de,
But you
de
came
Madrid.
first when you were younger, and then when you were 16, yeah.
Right. Right. And so it was always this back and forth between Madrid and Miami. And then, so somewhere in that dance, I became more comfortable with English, which now looking back, I'm like, how is that even possible? Like, I grew up speaking in Spanish. My school in Spain was purely en español.
Y tú y yo hablamos en español todo el tiempo, y con los abuelos y con mamá.
Y todos hablamos español, pero en algún momento el inglés se convirtió mucho más natural para mí. Pero creo que para mí fue una combinación de las palabras, pero también de lo visual, ¿no? Y creo que eso es un poco el libro, que no, me resulta, la manera en la que escribo, ¿no? Y la manera en la que escribí este libro fue visualizándolo todo, que me imagino que también lo aprendí de ti.
Ahora,
Yes.
como todos los hijos buscamos encontrar nuestra propia identidad, ¿no? Tu hermano Nicolás ha encontrado su identidad en el fútbol, es un gran kicker de la Universidad de Princeton, y en relaciones internacionales. Y tú podrías haber seguido el camino de mamá o el mío de comunicadora, y de pronto pensé que habías escogido la política, que habías encontrado en la política, después de trabajar en la Casa Blanca, tu camino, pero de pronto has encontrado en la política y en la comunicación algo muy especial.
Sí.
Una mezcla, ¿no? Y fíjate,
Sí.
te fijaste que te presentaron como activista y periodista.
Sí, yo creo que muchas personas creen que esos son dos títulos. Tal vez diría que tal vez en tu generación...
It would have been impossible.
It would have been sí, o sea, yo creo que
even when people says, "Hey, Jorge, you're an activist," they say, "No, wait. I'm a journalist. I'm just ask questions."
Right.
But in your case, you feel very comfortable, right?
Yeah, I think the way that I've sort of seen the trajectory is sort of like a pendulum, no, of where the balance of power is, no, and I feel like I've been ping-ponging between the worlds of politics and the worlds of storytelling, or the worlds of communication and the worlds of activism. And to me, the way that I've sort of thought about it and visualized it is where can I affect the most change, right? And there was a moment where Barack Obama ran for office and he won, and I believed in that moment that the most natural place for me to be in, and where I felt like I could be more impactful, was inside of DC and inside of that bubble. Right. There was a moment then when Hillary Clinton ran for office, and I felt like the legacy of what she meant, that's where power and change was. And now I believe that power is outside. It's outside of politics. It's outside of that bubble. And it's more in words and in communications and in storytelling. And so it is sometimes hard to defend, right? I think rightly so, people have concerns and like, can you put these biases in boxes? Can you do your job without biases? And it's an exercise, right? And that this book was an exercise of that. But I think you can. And I think if you see it that way, which is something that you've always taught me, you always question power, no? And I think that's a lesson regardless of the field that you're in. And you can do that without biases.
And I think you can, as long as you are transparent. I mean, when I'm doing the newscast, I just got to be completely objective. I would never give my opinion during the newscast, El Noticiero Univision. Yeah. However, when I write a book or a column or having an interview, I do have opinions, and you too. So you were talking about power. I in my generation, Paola, and we've talked this in the past, we thought of changes in a big way. We thought of revolutions, and we wanted to change the world, and we wanted to change our countries. And then your generation, you realize that you can actually create these changes on a daily basis. You're the generation of the dreamers, no? In your face, and you can change things on a daily basis. What are the big differences that you see between your generation of Latinos or Latinx and in my generation?
Actually, I think of something that you told me. I think it was during the 2018 midterm elections, and you said, in my generation, it was Dolores Huerta, right? In your generation, there's many Dolores Huerta, and you say that, and I think about that a lot, and I think that was what this book ended up becoming, right? It was different stories of different heroes and different Dolores Huertas in different battleground states that, in their ways, I think the thread amongst them is that they saw people in your generation and the older folks in their generations, and they saw their grandparents and their parents sort of normalize a lot of the injustices they had been living with, and they're picking their own fights based on that, right? So in California, I met, los hijos de los campesinos que crecieron viendo a sus papás en los campos viviendo sin derechos, y los hijos no quieren vivir de esa manera. In Miami, I spent a lot of time with Carlitos, one of the Parkland students who rejects like normalizing massacres and rejects normalizing gun violence, right? And in Texas, it was the same thing. And I found those little stories in every parts of the country, but I think a lot of it stems from us watching what the older generations of Latinos sort of had to accept as normal, no?
But just to give them credit, Paola, sometimes when we were talking about undocumented immigrants before, they learned to be silent and to be invisible in order to survive. That was the only way to survive, and they were right. And now that we don't have immigration reform, and that's another story, but since we don't have immigration reform and we still have 10 or 11 million undocumented immigrants, I see them as a generation that is sacrificing itself for your generation. They're saying, okay, maybe it was not me, but the dreamers and my kids and my children, they're going to be okay in this country. And one of them is going to be the first president or the first president of this country, Latino.
Yeah, no, of course. And I don't take that silence for granted. I mean, I think that silence is very powerful. Assimilation is a tool of survival, you know, and I also saw that everywhere. But I do think, and I do think you start seeing that change, that political change in the midterms, and you're seeing it right now, right, where people do want to speak up.
So when I first arrived here in the United States, January 2nd, 1983, it was quite easy to define Hispanics or Latinos. There were Mexicans, Mexicanos, Cubanos, y Puertorriqueños. That's it. And we were about 15 million. And actually, we were baptized by Richard Nixon, and then in the census in 1980, they used for the first time this term Hispanic. Something was changing. The big changes came in 1965 with the new immigration reform. But then tell me what has happened since then, when I arrived in this country in the 1980s, how we went from Latinos or Hispanics to Latinx. What happened in between?
So what happened in between is what was the difference between these two screens, no? And the way that I sort of think about it is, until literally now, the story that people know about Latinos is the story that you've been telling on Univision, no? And it's the story of your arrival and folks that had your similar arrival, which is the story of the immigration narrative, no? That's what carries and has always carried the story of Latinos. And so I think that's a question that too many people haven't thought about how have we changed, since when you arrived until your children right now. And the change, I think we can see it in the screen, right? With what, you and mom sort of fought for, I've been able to have opportunities, and I've been able to claim my rights, and I've been able to, be openly gay and call myself a Latina and be a woman and be all of these things at the same time. And I've surrounded myself by a community that I found in this book, which looks extremely different from what you and I look like, right? Which is a community of 3 million Afro-Latinos, of over 1 million Latinos that are indigenous, over, hundreds and thousands of Latinos that are not Catholic, but are choosing Islam instead of a religion that they thought they had to choose, right? It's Latinos that are transgender and queer, and people that care about immigration, but that they also care about the criminal justice reform system. So it is a community that honestly looks a lot like us and very, very little like us, And so that's a question that I wish we would have thought about a long time ago.
Well, what I see is that the country, the US, is diversifying, as we've talked these hundreds of times, but in 2044, and I really hope that I'm going to be here, Paola, with you. But in 2044, everyone in this country is going to be a minority. Everyone is going to be a minority. And this is an incredible demographic revolution. So, but what people don't realize is that at the same way this country is diversifying, Latinos are diversifying. And then you are, ¿qué eres? México, cubano-americana, y Nicolás, tu hermano, es Porto, cubano, México-americano, ¿no?
Sí.
And it is much more diverse that we want to accept. And I think that's where you found the Latinx community. Now, tell me about the word Latinx. Every time I write Latinx on Twitter, on social media, me critican y me dicen, pero ¿qué estás escribiendo? Claro. Eso no existe, todo eso, pero ¿qué es Latinx? ¿Cómo lo defines tú?
Latinx, lo digo en español y luego lo digo en inglés. Para mí, Latinx es simplemente una manera más inclusiva de llamar a los 60 millones de latinos que vivimos en este país, ¿no? La X es una invitación para cualquier persona que en algún momento en sus vidas se haya sentido discriminado o no parte de una caja, ¿no? Ya seas, como dije antes, ya seas afro-latino, seas indígena, seas una mujer que cree que se merece más derechos, seas gay, trans, seas de color blanco, negro o seas un inmigrante indocumentado o no. O sea, Latinx es simplemente una manera de reconocer realmente de lo diversos que somos y reconocer que nos afectan muchas más políticas que una. Y creo que hace falta reconocerlo. Entonces, la X de alguna manera nos empuja a tener estas conversaciones, ¿no? Nos empuja a que la gente se dé cuenta de a quién llamamos comunidad. Y por eso es tan interesante observar el rechazo, ¿no? When people reject the word Latinx, I think your follow-up question should be, why is that, right? And because I think, yeah, and it's very simple, but I think it taps into, and that's part of the conversation too, right? I think in the last months, especially, there has been an awakening, right? In this important recognition that, as Latinos, we too have a lot of internalized biases, and we too perpetuate racism, right? And we too can be pretty bad allies amongst ourselves. And so again, the question is why? Does it bother us to see ourselves wholly under the sunlight and see exactly who we are? And if it does, again, why is that? And so I do think that there is, at least what I found in the book, no? Individually, we can all call ourselves whatever we want. No, of course, you can call yourself Hispanic, Latino, whatever you want, Cubano, Mexicana. Pero I do think that collectively, we are going through an identity crisis that is deeper and could have greater consequences than we think we do, no? Because so far, when people think of us, no, they think of us in numbers, right? That is the strength that people talk about. No, we vote as one, no, the 32 million. We consume as one. Our voice is one. And so unless we try to figure out what that voice looks like collectively, it is going to start disintegrating. No?
But obviously, we cannot talk about Latinos as a monolithic group, right?
Of course not.
That's what you found.
Yeah, of course. No, we cannot talk about each other in a monolith, and we cannot pretend like we are one. We have to accept that we are liberals and conservative, no, and we are different colors. But I do think what's important now is going back to your story, right? I think a lot of us have lost touch of the story of your generation and older generations, which is the immigrant story. That story makes people be empathetic, no? It makes you be humble. And I feel like we're forgetting that. And so to me, one of the unique things of the Latino community is that we are humble people. No, we are empathetic. And if you are empathetic and you remember why we came to this country in the first place, then you do recognize and you do appreciate and you do value the diversity of your community, and you start seeing yourselves in different lights. And I had many conversations like this, including with conservative Latinos, that to my face, we had nothing in common, but then you start debunking these myths, and all of a sudden you start seeing more things in common. And that's the only thing I'm advocating with this book, a little bit more empathy. And to me, that's what the X does.
Something that is really interesting is that during the debate tomorrow, there's going to be the last one, and we're going to be watching.
Sí.
The immigration hasn't come up as a big issue.
No.
It really hasn't happened. And then still we have 10 million undocumented immigrants in this country. Still we have the issue of the dreamers, that they deserve to be in this country because they are Americans. They're truly Americans, and they're my heroes. But at the same time, people don't realize that at around the year 2000, after 9/11, that the vast majority of the growth within the Hispanic community is not coming from immigration, but it's coming from Latinos being born here in the United States. So I want you to tell me some of the stories that you found. I still remember you traveled before COVID, more than ever before. I don't know how many thousands of miles you traveled around the country, no? And you have many incredible, beautiful stories. Cuéntame de los grupos mayas que no hablan español, Paola, que encontraste. ¿Dónde estaban?
Pues sí, me impactaron muchas historias, pero una de las historias que me impactó bastante, o de los personajes, fue estar en la frontera, ¿no? Y uno en la frontera igual, se cree que los inmigrantes que cruzan la frontera hablan español, ¿no? Que se parecen de alguna manera. Muchas personas creen que los que cruzan la frontera son mexicanos, y luego estuve en Arizona y encontré que el porcentaje de personas que está cruzando en la frontera en Arizona, muchos de ellos son de Guatemala, muchos de ellos son mayas, y muchos de ellos
no hablan español, ¿no?
No hablan español, o por lo menos el español no es su primer lenguaje. Entonces, algo que me impresionó mucho estuve en un centro en el que muchas de las personas que son detenidas y que luego las dejan salir, una vez que las dejan salir, muchos de ellos van a un centro humanitario, ¿no? Y entré en este centro humanitario donde había distintos inmigrantes que acaban de cruzar la frontera. Y noté que muchas personas estaban hablando español, pero noté que había una mujer que no hablaba, que estaba en silencio, ¿no? Y que como que no estaba utilizando las palabras. Y luego me di cuenta que la razón por la que no hablaba, ¿no? Por la que estaba un poco más tímida, era porque era maya y no hablaba español. Y la gente le estaba preguntando cosas en español. ¿Cómo te sientes? ¿Qué necesitas? ¿No? Esta mujer acaba de cruzar la frontera y no estaba hablando. Y luego me di cuenta que era porque era una mujer maya que estaba con su hijo y no entendía. Entonces, de repente te empiezas a dar cuenta y estaba mirando alrededor del cuarto y había dibujos que niños mayas habían hecho indicándole a los doctores americanos y a los doctores latinos las partes de sus cuerpos en sus lenguajes mayas, porque les querían explicar a los doctores y a los voluntarios qué es los problemas que ellos tenían, ¿no? Cómo se sentían. Entonces, ahí es donde te empiezas a dar cuenta de que la experiencia del migrante es completa, es muy distinta, ¿no? Uno sufre en silencio muchas veces. Y luego esa misma comunidad maya que encontré en la frontera, de repente encontré una comunidad indígena enorme en el sur de Estados Unidos, en Georgia, en South Carolina, en estados en los que estados en los que uno jamás piensa encontrar a estas comunidades. Y la diferencia que encontré, ¿no? Es que no acaban de llegar ahí. Llevan años y décadas ahí, y los hijos de estos papás mayas y mamás mayas, los hijos están haciendo algo que sus papás no hacían antes, ¿no? Los papás se quedaban en silencio, y esto es lo que ellos me explicaron, ¿no? Muchas veces cuando alguien les hablaba se quedan en silencio, un poco como que quieren estar más en la sombra. Lo que encontré fue al revés. Encontré que los niños están hablando en canjobal, hablando en mam, que se quieren poner sus trajes culturales, ¿no? Que quieren un poco redefinir lo que significa ser americano y que lo están haciendo con orgullo. Y me impactó mucho porque a la vez tú les preguntas, ¿no? ¿Te sientes en casa? ¿No? O qué significa estar en esta parte del país. Y ellos, como primeros indígenas de este país, ¿no? Que tienen otro tipo de conexión con el país, con la tierra, se sentían en casa, porque de alguna manera sienten como que esta es su tierra, ¿no? Este siempre fue su país. Entonces, fue muy interesante tener este tipo de conversaciones y entender las distintas conexiones que ellos tenían con ambientes que uno cree que no son de ellos, pero claro que son de ellos.
When I was driving here, we were having a conversation, and I remember asking you, so tell me about the story that impacted you the most. And then you were telling me about a transgender Latina that you met in was that at the border too?
So another one of the stories that I told was I spent some time with the transgender community, and one of the people that I follow, Carolina, she had a big impact on me just because I feel like what she embodies is very much an element that is reflected everywhere in the Latino community, right? And that is, wait, my computer's about to die. I don't know why. One second. Sorry.
That was supposed to happen to me, not to you.
But it happened to me. Sorry. And I don't
¿Qué vas
have
a hacer? ¿Vas a poner, ya está funcionando o no?
Sí, funciona, pero se me acabó. Ah, no, es que se me acabó la batería, no sé por qué.
Claro, debe ser la batería.
Oh, it's because it wasn't connected.
Claro, por eso. Conéctalo.
Ya está.
A ver,
sorry,
¿hasta allá?
anyways. Sí, ya está. Y the story with Carolina, what impacted me the most about her is that I feel like a lot of people are able to sort of push through very difficult situations in life. No, anything comes at you, and people are able to go through, and they're able to go on through their days, even with COVID. No, and we do so because typically there's like something at the end of a tunnel, no, or some form of light at the end of the tunnel, or some form of hope and vision that you can walk towards, no, some form of light. And with people like Carolina, no, who are transgender, who are people that statistically, if they were to stay in Latin America, they wouldn't live past the age of 35 because of the violence and the discrimination and the hatred towards them.
They would have been killed.
They would have been killed. No, statistically, Carolina, past the age of 35, yeah, she would not be here. And so being with her, no, this is someone that migrated from Mexico because she was trans, who got to Arizona. In Arizona, her dream was to have a job. She couldn't find a job. She ended up being detained again. She spent, months in detention. She was assaulted in detention. And yet, you ask her, is it worth it? Was this trip worth it? Right? Was this American dream worth it? And the answer is always yes. No, and that to me is just incredible, right? That resilience that I found with her, this idea that she can go through her day and keep pushing through and still sort of carry pride, even though she sees no light at the end of the tunnel. That really stuck with me. Because I think there's a lot to learn from that.
You were starting this conversation saying that there are many differences between your generation and my generation, and our attitude toward power. And then I realized now that we share something in common. Maybe it's something very American that you might not find in Latin America, where the conditions of violence and the economy are completely different. But the concept of sí se puede, the concept of being absolutely convinced that it doesn't matter who you are, you can make it in this country. That's something that you share and I share. This concept of sí se puede es de Dolores Huerta, por cierto. Mucha gente cree que es de César Chávez, pero no. Dolores Huerta me ha dicho, perdóname, pero eso es mío. Entonces, lo creó Dolores, y luego lo usó César Chávez y por supuesto lo usó Barack Obama. But this beautiful concept that sí se puede, it's something that I see in Latinos in the United States, or in the Latinx community in the United States, but that I do not necessarily see in Latin America because the disparities and the conditions in Latin America are different, and that concept might not be applicable.
No, you're right. And I think, I think it's a time where people are very rightly so, questioning like, was that American dream even real, right? Especially during a time of COVID and in the last 4 years, like, was it real, no? Or was it all an illusion? And the insane thing is that amidst the craziness of it all and the hardships of it all, we keep going, no? People keep going. And that is remarkable, honestly.
Yeah, I think we're going from big numbers to power very slowly, but here we are right now. We have only 4 senators. We should have 20. But maybe Ben Luján might be the.
I thought you were going to run for office.
Well, you know, at some point, when I was a little younger, when I went back to get my master's, when was that? About 20-something years ago, I really thought that I was going to get into politics.
And why didn't you?
Know. Well, I didn't know if it was going to be here in the United States or back in Mexico. And then the same thing happened to me as it has happened to you recently. Then you realize that I have a voice, and I wanted to use my voice, and that I could have more influence or power by doing what I'm doing than getting into politics. So that's why I decided to stay as a journalist, and don't regret it at all. I mean, it's been a fantastic ride. Now is your opportunity. Now the question for you is, what are you going to do with your life? And it's a big question, but you're going to have to decide, or maybe not, Paola. Maybe here, look, you know the story. When I was growing up, my father told me, Jorge, tú solo puedes ser o doctor, abogado, arquitecto o ingeniero. You can only those 4 professions. That's it. Those were the legitimate professions for him. And then I told him, well, I want to study communications. And he told me, what are you going to do with that? In other words, I could only choose one thing. But in your generation, you realize.
But finish the story, because the real story is, what was your father's dream? What was my grandpa's dream?
He was a great magician. And he should have been a magician.
A magician, right.
Yeah, he should have been, and he would have been the best magician. But he chose to follow his dad's advice, and he became an architect. And I learned from that. So I chose to be a journalist.
I learned from that. And that I always think of that story of my grandpa, you know, that he always wanted to be a magician, and he was a great magician, and he decided not to do that. But yeah, and that's something I'm very grateful for my mom and for you, for it is an immense privilege for me to be able to move in the world this way, and so I'm very conscious of that. But to truly grow up thinking and watching you guys and thinking like, I can do this, and I can do whatever I want because you guys sort of allowed me to do that. Anyways,
but I love how you move in the world, Paula. Me encanta cómo te mueves y a dónde vas y haces todo. And it's you, and it's your generation. And the beautiful thing is that you don't have to choose one thing, as I thought I had to. You can do, and you can be many different things at the same time. And that's beautiful. That's something that you've learned. And just to use that little bit of power that you and your generation have, and to use it for different things. We're going to have to go to the questions, but can I ask you a couple of things about this election?
Sure. See.
I don't want to get you in trouble. Anyway, everybody knows that you work for Barack Obama and then with Hillary Clinton. So what do you think is going to happen this election? Let me put it in perspective. I've seen the polls. Biden is ahead 9 or 10 points of Donald Trump. But on October 26, 2016, Hillary Clinton was ahead 14 points from Donald Trump, according to AP, on October the 26th. So are you concerned that the story might be repeated?
I feel like, wait, am I like frozen? Because I feel like it's...
No. I can hear you. The image is okay. Not perfect, but it's okay.
All right, fine. You know I hate that. Look, I think in the Clinton campaign, the message that we had the last days of the election was stronger together. No, and that was the message. And I think the reason why it didn't really stick is because we truly didn't know the existential threat that we were even talking about, right? Like, what did stronger together mean? And I think that was always like a hole that people would poke, like, what exactly does the messaging mean? Even though I think it was a good one. Now I think we've had four years of this, and you can be a Republican or a Democrat. And regardless of that, I think morally, there's a lot of things that make you question this presidency. Even just today, the news of, the over 500 migrant children that have been separated from their parents, and that to this day have not seen their parents. And so that's not a political issue anymore. No, that's a moral issue. So I think with that in mind, I expect people to come out. I expect a lot of Latinos to come out because of the threat that poses, because of the threat that COVID poses, and also because there's been a sentiment that everyone has felt, regardless of how privileged you are or not, there has been hate, that has been very much directed towards Latinos. And we saw the massacre in El Paso. We saw the hate crimes that the FBI has reported that have reached a peak against Latinos in the last 10 years during this presidency. And so you don't get to forget hate. You don't really get to walk around that. And so I do think people will show up in huge numbers, honestly. And I remember, 2016, and you told me in 2016, I remember I believed that Latinos were going to show up in crazy numbers. And I remember you told me perfectly, you were like, you are kind of delusional because I'm seeing something else. Y me acuerdo, tú me dijiste eso.
And 30 million stayed home. I hope that this is not the case in 2020. We have 32 million eligible to vote. And I hope that 50% don't stay home. Why do you think they don't vote? What's the problem?
They're not the problem. It's that people haven't done the homework. No, institutions haven't done the homework. Politicians haven't done the homework. No, they haven't. You can't expect people to vote if you're not winning their vote. No, if you're not putting them around the table and asking them what type of change they want to see. You ask for votes because you win for votes. You win the votes. And so that's the problem. It's not that, this idea that Latinos are, lazy or they're apathetic. That's a myth. It's that people want to see, at the end of the day, people vote because they are inspired. You can be as scared as you want, but if you do not show up, if you're not inspired, if you don't believe that collectively you can make a difference, if you don't believe that your voice is going to count. And so the job of politicians is to ensure that they have to inspire people, and to inspire people, you have to make them feel like they belong in the movement. And so it's,
And in this election, I've talked to many Latinos who say, well, I don't want to talk to Donald Trump because he's made sexist and racist remarks. I don't feel comfortable voting for him. But on the other hand, they say, well, but with the Democrats, they promise a lot of things. They tell me, I still remember the 3 million people that were deported, or I still remember the promise made by Barack Obama, and nothing happened. So why should I vote for them? So that's why some Latinos feel very uncomfortable with that. You want to answer some questions, Paola?
Vale, okay.
Creo que tenemos como unos 10 minutos más. Déjame ver. Si tienen preguntas, me las pueden enviar aquí.
A ver, algunas van a ser buenas y otras malas.
No importa, pero a ver, ahí te va la primera. ¿Lista?
Okay.
Dice, Latinos are almost 20% of the US population, yet we seem to be largely invisible in the mainstream media and cultural elite, film, media, politics, business. What do you think? Seeing Paola reporting for Vice and Jorge writing for the New York Times is a great step, but how do we get more visibility, Paola?
That's Betsaida. I know Betsaida. And Betsaida is a person that I've learned a lot from.
Betsaida Alcantara.
Betsaida, no, you know her too. It starts with, I think it starts within institutions. No, I said this comment before in another talk, but it stuck with me a lot. One other fellow writer that I just that I just met, we were talking about the process of writing, right? The process of writing a book. And at the end of the day, many times, the first thing when you write, you think that you're writing to a white audience. No. You think that your audience is white because you're taught, and these institutions teach you, that is the mainstream audience. And then the writer told me, Ingrid told me, you have to sort of like close your eyes and envision an audience where you get to choose who your audience is, no? And you get to choose who you're writing for first, and who you put in the first row, and in the second row, and the third row, and the fourth row, and you put, black and brown folks in the front row, and then you choose how you want that to look like. And so that just taught me that it takes a writer to rewrite the rules and to rewrite the visions, right? And so the change truly happens. We can be visible as much as you want, but you need people at the top of these institutions to believe in that change, right? To believe in what a different audience looks like, and to be the one that is changing the rules. And so, yes, we need more visibility, but we need more power. And power, at the end of the day, lies in these structures. And so I think we just need to push these power structures to hire more people that believe in rewriting these rules. And so, anyways, that was my big lesson learned from her. And I think there is a movement. I think people are feeling pressure, and because these conversations and the protests and the activism is working.
Sandra Cisneros, the writer, mi amiga, she used to say that you have to write the story that you're the only one who can write. And that when she goes to classrooms, they say, don't write the same story that everybody can write. No, tell me the story that you are the only one in this world who can tell us. And I think that's very important. Let me go to another question for both. What would be your advice for journalism students? Sometimes it's scary to have a voice when you are not from this country.
Okay, you go.
No,
Well, no, you go. I mean, you're wiser.
No. In this case, you don't need, again, big institutions. It is incredible what you can do with your platforms, with social media. I don't think I would have a job if I wouldn't have presence on Twitter and Facebook. So if you're a journalism student, or if you're a journalist just starting, just realize that we are right now in the middle of the most important story of our lifetime, the pandemic. And that the story is right in front of you. It's just right there. Write about it. Tell me how you feel. Tell me what you see. Report about it. And this is important. Speak up and use your voice. If you use your voice, that's a big difference. And I think you've been using your voice, Paola, no?
See, and I mean, just to that, you show me, and we've learned this, like the biggest weapon we have right now is our phones. No, we can do anything from our phones. We can tell important stories with our phones. We can record people's voices and take those pictures that no one else is taking with our phones. And so, just sort of view this as a weapon. No, you don't need big screens, and you don't need mainstream media right now. And so you can start breaking into these spaces with something that is, very, very close to you.
A ver, te voy a dar varias preguntas rápidas y contestamos rápido para cubrirlas. ¿Lista?
Vale. Okay.
Paola, how do you envision the Latino electorate shifting beyond 2020?
I mean, I think we're just starting to understand what power looks like. No, I think we saw it in 2018. We had more Latino, 1 in 4 Latinas voted for the first time in 2018, in the 2018 midterms, right? 1 in 4. It was their first time casting their vote in a midterm. And so I think we're going to continue to see those trends. I think in 2020, that trend is going to not only get bigger, but I think we're going to elect more Latinos to Congress. They're going to be more diverse. You can like AOC or not, no, you can agree with her politics or not, but we see how her voice is changing Congress. And so I think we're about to see more of that wave.
She has an incredible, very strong voice. Now, do you think Trump is having an influence on the political movement of Latin American countries and Spain, for example, with the rise of Vox?
Yeah, of course. I think the Trump effect goes beyond our borders, right? I think populism, the undercurrent of populism, of course, it's happening. It's happening in Spain. It's happening in the UK. It's happening in France. It's happening in Italy. I mean, it's not Trump's creation, right? It is a historic undercurrent that has been a part of our history forever. And so, yes, that is a present threat with Trump and without Trump. And of course, if Trump gets reelected again, that will send an important sign to people in other countries. And if he doesn't, it'll be as well. It'll be the same thing. And so I think a lot of people are watching us for sure.
Another question: with the Supreme Court decision to shorten the census collection dates, and in general, how can we better support people like Carolina in this country?
I will say Carolina, for the first time, has become a U.S. citizen, and she will be casting her vote, which is, it's amazing. She went through the whole journey, and so she will be voting for the first time in 2020. One thing that Carolina told me that I remember is that she said that when she left detention, when she left her detention center in Eloy in Arizona, there was no one waiting for her outside. And that's something that is very vivid and that is stuck in her memory. She said that she left detention and that nadie la estaba esperando ahí fuera, right? And so I think we just have to be mindful of where we are and understand that, like, trans people are around us and amongst us, and that they want community, that they want allies, and just that metaphor. She left detention and no one was waiting for her, and so I would just start connecting with your local LGBTQ orgs.
Pregunta: ¿cómo has enfrentado a personas que cuestionan tu identidad múltiple como latina, mexicana, cubana, americana?
Sin darle mucho pensamiento, o sea, siempre he intentado ser como soy, intento mucho no avergonzarme de quién soy, ¿sabes? No cambiar mi aspecto por nadie, no callarme porque alguien me pide que me calle, y creo que si realmente la gente entiende quién soy yo y entiende quién es cada una de las personas con las que está alrededor en este mundo, no creo que nadie vería ningún tipo de problema.
Okay, a ver, a couple of questions and that's it, porque se nos va a pasar el tiempo. As a PhD student currently studying the term Latinx, one of the arguments I have come across against using the term is that it is another linguistic form of colonization because its origin and use are mainly within the United States. What do you think?
It is. It is very much a term that is meant to capture the experience of U.S. Latinos, right? I don't think the word right now, I mean, I think you're right. I think anywhere you go beyond our borders, no one is using Latinx, no? In fact, they're using Latine, no? But I think the word itself very much captures the experience of Latinos in the U.S. And that includes, and that's something I write about, understanding, how a lot of the erasure that we are facing starts beyond our borders, right? I spend a lot of time with understanding the journey and the narrative of undocumented Black immigrants, right? And that starts beyond our borders. And that to me is the X, right? I understand the rejection of it and the pushback, but at least the way that I'm trying to define the X is to understand how our journey starts beyond our borders and take it from there, no? But you're right, it is a very US-centric word. And I think at least in the way that I'm interpreting it, I think because it does capture a very US-centric experience.
Okay, so the book is Finding Latinx in Search of the Voices Redefining Latino Identity. Nada, te queda un minuto. ¿Qué quieres decir, Paola?
Bueno, más que nada, just gracias to Books and Books for doing this. Books and Books has always been one of my mom's favorite stores. We always go. We would always go there. I know, but I'm giving mom credit. No, she loves it, and I know you love it too. But I truly love Books and Books. I've always loved it, and so I'm just very grateful and for y'all to be hosting us, and Dad for you to rush from your newscast and have this conversation with me, and just for always like believing in me so much. You and my mom and everyone, just that I don't think I could have done this without that. I don't, and so just thank you for that, and for everyone, just if you can, buy the book, open your mind, let's have these conversations and these debates and these pushbacks, and that's part of evolving as a community.
We love you both so much. We are so grateful that you joined us tonight. Esto ha sido una conversación fascinante, pero especialmente de ver la dinámica entre ustedes has been amazing. Paola, congratulations.
Thank you.
We're going to be selling this book like crazy at all of our stores. And I'm going to remind everybody who's watching, once again, lo pueden comprar. Just hit the button at the bottom of the screen en inglés, en español. Y espero que nos veamos pronto en persona cuando pase todo esto. Pero les agradezco mucho que hayan sido parte de nuestra experiencia virtual por ahora, nuestro little virtual bookshop. And I wish you, all the very best. You're an incredibly inspiring, beautiful human being. Jorge,
Thank you.
You have done well.
Yo creo
You have done very well.
Yo creo que sí.
Entonces, muchas gracias a los dos y
Gracias.
Nos despedimos. Cuídense mucho, sigan bien y hasta la próxima.
Hasta luego. Gracias, Pauli. Te
Adiós.
quiero mucho. Estoy muy orgulloso,
Gracias,
de
Paps.
verdad.